Welcome to another episode of NSCTV, and thank you to our patrons, supporters, and our sponsors for making this possible. In this episode, we catch up with an old friend from Alice Springs, Ron Sterry. You might remember that we helped Ron keep his licence after Northern Territory Police charged him with 5 offences after he went to help his neighbour who had been stabbed. We helped Ron beat 4 of those charges, only to find the Northern Territory Police then raided his place and hit him with a new licence revocation notice in 2022. Ron's fight against this latest notice has now been concluded, so we catch up with Ron to find out what happened and why the Chief Judge has decided to write to the Police Minister to have the law changed in the Northern Territory. So stay with us. All right, we're here again with Ron Sterry from the Northern Territory. How you doing, Ron?
I'm fantastic, thank you. Hope you've all had a good Christmas.
Now, this is obviously a bit of an update on your situation. To try to recap, for those who hadn't been following the story, Ron went to the aid of a neighbour in Alice Springs in 2021, about April, I think it was, and she'd been stabbed, and you offered, we went to provide first aid. You actually took a firearm, bayonet with you, and that was really big for protection because somebody had been stabbed and it was dark and the police weren't around, so you weren't sure of your own safety, I guess, but having to attend to this lady.
I'd been told the assailant was still in the area, so yeah.
Well, you're out there and you did what you did, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on. But you applied first aid, police turned up. There were a couple of interactions with police, but basically they, as a result of you having your firearm and the bayonet with you in public, they seized those items. They suspended or revoked, they suspended your license, I think, at the time. And we fought that in the Alice Springs local court, and you had the property returned to you at the time. And in fact, the judge provided you, not only return the property, but ordered the return of your license at the time. But following that, it wasn't quite a peaceful ending. It actually got a little bit worse because the police then, in fact, I think at the time they had charged you with 5 offences.
Yes.
4 of them, I think, related to the firearm, and one of them was related, in fact, firearm and ammunition. And there was another one about the bayonet, and it was a bayonet one charge which, unfortunately, you were stuck with in the Alice Springs local court, but you got your equipment back. So following that, the police decided when you went home to come to your property, and they actually, you were in Adelaide at the time, and they accused you of trying to hide from them. In fact,
not according to police. Yes, apparently I was inside my house watching them and refusing to cooperate, even though I was offering them evidence of my presence in Adelaide.
And they said they had some paperwork for you, which actually was it was a firearm suspension or revocation notice at the time.
So at the time, we thought it was an appeal notice, and we thought they may have been appealing the decision. But it turned out it was a firearms revocation.
They weren't satisfied with that, so they walked around, looked in your window, and they found a chemistry kit.
Wow! And they effectively trespassed.
Came back with a search warrant, entered your property with the assistance of somebody you worked with. They searched your house. They drilled holes in your safe.
Yes.
But they were stopped by John Bertoli, who is the barrister we engaged, because by the time this happened, there'd been some phone calls made about why the police were there and what they were doing. So
John put it was quite absurd because I'd contacted John, who then contacted the police on site, and from my understanding was he was reading the law to them as they were breaking the law. So it's just a really absurd situation.
Yeah. They didn't stop there, actually. They also took a whole lot of items from your your house, which, as I said, a lot of it, some of it came from a chemistry kit, and also there was vinegar and famous chili oil and God knows what
some
else.
Aspirin.
Yeah, and also some Nerf guns and things, which So really, out of that, all the analysis that was done, there was nothing illegal there.
No. With the Nerf guns as well, they took them without leaving the proper seizure receipts. So
Paperwork.
It basically is theft. The drug squad were fine. They left the receipts. They did everything properly, and I'm not happy about it, but at least they were somewhat professional. But certainly not the firearm squad.
Yeah, unfortunately, you didn't quite get off scot-free at the time because there was a tin of air pellets that they took, and they actually were going to charge you, or did they charge you? With unsecured pellets.
They haven't charged me, and now I'm kind of shifting into speculation here, but I suspect that they will want to. The issue is I've since moved out from that residence. With the Nerf guns that were taken, they've decided that they are not in fact 3D printed firearms, and they are not in fact replica firearms. And they're offering for me to come and pick him up to be returned to me. I was in Adelaide, and I offered authorized person to pick it up, and they refused that. So I'm a bit suspicious because they started the email with, "Oh, it's not a trick. No. We're not trying to bring you in to charge you or anything."
Because in Northern Territory, air pellets are ammunition, and it was seen as unsecured ammunition, whereas it's not necessarily that way in other states.
Well, I would argue that they would be secure, seeing as they had to go through the effort of breaking into my house and coercing my employers to do so. So I think they're actually rather secure, not to mention
and
their pellets are inert. So maybe common sense is not applying here.
Yeah, their efforts are on the day also were video recorded by yourself. You, I think you uploaded something like 30 gigabytes of video for us, which is nice.
Only partially, unfortunately.
Because they unplugged it all.
They shut down my security system.
Didn't I get the idea that...
Bit nefarious, I think.
Yeah, anyway. So, look, out of that, there was nothing except... So you've been on the local court charges. There was really nothing out of the raid that at all. But then they still issued you with a revocation notice because going back to the local court matter, you have been found guilty of the weapons charge for carrying a bayonet.
Correct.
Which we thought had been dealt with because the judge had made orders that it be returned and you have your license and everybody goes off, but they took a different view. And that went to the Firearm Appeals Tribunal last year. Sorry, this year. By the time this is aired, it'll be last year. And that obviously took quite a long time to work through because it's done by way of submissions. The police put their written position into the tribunal. We put ours and they respond and so forth. So in December, the Chief Judge Elizabeth Morris handed down her decision. Actually, it was going to be early December, then it was just delayed a bit. She wanted more time.
I was hoping for a Christmas miracle. Unfortunately not.
We were confident because it was clearly a very well considered, thought out decision.
And there was a number of Supreme Court decisions supporting it.
Yeah, and unfortunately what happened is that she, I guess it's good news and bad news, if there is good news, but the bad news is that she backed the police's position on the basis that a change in the law, specifically in relation to the part of the Firearms Act that relates to suspension of licenses, the changing of a comma to a semicolon or something to change the way that the whole section's to be read, and therefore her understanding was that no, we were stuck with that, and unfortunately, because you've been found guilty of the earlier charge, which I think you'd agreed to, or pled guilty to. We'll come back to that. That, in fact, because of that, that did trigger the license suspension. So, in fact, no, your license is revoked. Just take us through that that earlier agreement. Was it an agreement?
So we had a court order backing the return of my license and the continued use of my firearms, including the return of my firearms. And I got to have my firearms for a month, which was fantastic. But unfortunately, the police handled the situation they did, and it was taken from me.
You can support the NSC's legal actions by becoming a donor at nationalshooting.org.au.
In summary, I would never have accepted a finding of guilt without the promise of the return of my firearms and its continued use. So now they've basically double backed on that. And the unfortunate circumstance is, because the appeal time is over, I now cannot go back and appeal the decision. And what's particularly nasty, I'm finding, is the police had effectively waited until that appeal time had ended to strike. So they struck when they knew I couldn't do anything within the courts. So they know I can't take this whole issue outside of the court and start giving them grief, but it's okay for them to do so, which is upsetting and unjust, quite frankly.
Yeah. So the decision went against you on that basis, and that effectively locks you out from having a firearm license for 2 years from February. It was actually when you were found guilty.
From the date of the decision. Yeah. So I've already gone, I think it was a year and a half without the firearms. Yeah.
Potentially another 12 months or so before that time is up. And but it wasn't without a catch. And the catch is the fact the magistrate, even though she went with the police on it, she was purely looking at it from how the law's written. She certainly had a view on how this was fair or unfair on you. And in fact, just reading from an email which came in from Barrister John Bertoli, what he said was that she, being Judge Morris, also said she had considerable sympathy for your situation and agreed this was not an appropriate toward of costs. She noted that she believed the provision which tripped you up needed urgent review and undertook to provide copies of her decision and the previous Supreme Court decisions to the police minister in Northern Territory. And that she also noted she would send copies of all submissions to the minister so they could see how many different interpretations may be open to the provision, the absurd results that may follow, and why it needed urgent consideration and review. So here you've got a judge, the Chief Judge Morris, who's got to be writing to the police minister about this, which doesn't help you.
Doesn't help me, but it should help other people in the future not to fall through the gaps, which is good. Silver lining.
It's something.
Small victory. I'll take it. Yeah, it's not very often a judge will do such a thing. So, you mentioned there's absurd results. What it basically is, in summary, is someone that does not have a conviction, so I didn't get a conviction, will have a more severe punishment than someone who has been given a conviction. So effectively, if someone has committed a more serious crime, they would get less of a punishment, which is, absurd or obscene.
And that's probably why it
happened.
And look, your situation has been picked up by the NT News, 2, 3, 4 times, and they'll probably be doing another story on this coming up.
Yeah.
But still leaves us with this dilemma. It's just not where we want it to be at all. As I said, it's good at least that the judge will be writing to police minister. We hope that she actually, she's going to have to respond somehow.
Hopefully we can get some politicians moving.
Yeah. The background is actually you're back in Alice.
Yep.
just finishing things up there, and you're back to head back, and you're actually at university now, aren't you, in Adelaide?
Yeah, so I'm at the University of Flinders at the moment, studying a Bachelor of Science, Chemical Science. So we've turned my hobby into maybe some real skills. Yeah, it's been great.
You might even pick up a job with the non-territory police later on.
That was initially my plan, is to work in kind of like a drug enforcement, but I don't know anymore.
Well, I think it sounds like they need their help. So,
Yeah.
all right, Ron, we so much. Sorry
Thank
we ended up in that way, but we haven't lost, we haven't stopped covering this, and we will certainly be following this as it goes through the political system up in Darwin. So,
Yeah,
Ron, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Neil. You have a good night.
Thank you. Bye. Well, I've enjoyed this episode of NSCTV, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel now and tell your mates about it so they can do the same. Also, don't forget you can support our legal actions by supporting the NSC's work program at our website at nationalshooting.org.au. We'll see you later.